What's going on, guys? Welcome back into the channel. Today we have part 3 of our Fixing the Pittsburgh Steelers series here on the channel. And today we are going to be going over our off-season acquisitions from both free agency and the draft to show you guys what we did to address the needs of this team and address the way that we are reshaping this team with our change in offensive coordinator. So to start, let's go ahead and jump into the roster and take a look at the quarterback position. Now, Kyle Trask was our answer at the quarterback position in terms of bringing in competition for the QB spot. Now, Kyle Trask was not our first round pick. He was actually our second round pick. We took him with the 24th selection in the second round. A quarterback that will likely be around at that point in time, depending on how other teams decide to draft quarterbacks. There was a decision made here between actually a couple of players. It could have been a number of different quarterbacks that we decided to pick up in the second round in order to bring in competition with Mason Rudolph in forcing Ben Roethlisberger to retire, and Kyle Trask is the player that we decided to bring in at the quarterback spot. He was just the best available at that point in time, so that's the decision that we went with, and he's going to be wearing number 15. He will be in a preseason quarterback competition with Mason Rudolph. Mason Rudolph is likely to win that starting job, and this honestly is not that important of a pick right now because, like I said, we're trying to transition to a run strong type of scheme as opposed to leaning on our quarterback. So whoever we have at the quarterback position is going to likely have time to develop, especially with Kyle Trask being behind Mason Rudolph at the current point in time. Now, the biggest acquisitions for this team actually come at the halfback position, so we did decide to go with Leonard Fournette. There was at least one comment, if not a couple comments, that said Leonard Fournette is kind of the perfect fit for Pittsburgh. I know a lot of people had talked prior about him being traded to Pittsburgh when he was on his way out, and so we decided to bring him in on a I don't want to say a small deal necessarily, but a reasonable running back deal for Leonard Fournette to compete for the starting job. This was our biggest pickup, I think, in free agency overall. Maybe not necessarily the one that I'm the most hyped for, but I'm excited to see how this halfback battle plays out between James Conner, Leonard Fournette, as well as the other running backs. And in the draft, we also decided to pick up Master Teague out of Ohio State, a very similar type of running back, a hard runner, not the fastest guy or the most athletic guy in the world, but somebody that is, a decently sized player that it kind of fits our ground and pound type of game, and he is looking to compete for reps this season. And right now it's looking like James Conner, Leonard Fournette, and Master Teague might be the top 3 backs on this team. In addition to that, on a cheap, almost I want to say veteran minimum type of deal, we brought in Bo Scarborough as a 67 overall. The overalls for these players don't matter. I think that it's more so the requirements I want to focus on for what we need to do in terms of fixing this team. So, I said that I wanted to bring in a legitimate veteran running back that can compete and actually be there if James Conner goes down. If James Conner won the starting role, there needs to be another veteran that can immediately come in and we know that we can trust to run the football, because the Pittsburgh Steelers haven't had that. And so Leonard Fournette is that. You could insert any other veteran running back that has a similar running style and that would fit this type of scheme, but Leonard Fournette is just the specific one that I chose. I also chose to bring in a rookie halfback. This could be any number of rookie halfbacks, from Najee Harris up at the top to Master Teague to anybody down lower than him. Master Teague is the one that I specifically chose to go with because I like what I see out of Master Teague at Ohio State, and so that's the route that we decided to go. And then just brought in another kind of ground and pound hard-nosed runner in Bo Scarborough, coming off of an injury last season. This is the type of player that would be nice to fill out your halfback room and provide a heck of a lot of competition here in the preseason and a lot of options to go with heading into the regular season. You have so many options here now because we filled up the running back room, which Mike Tomlin specifically has failed to address in past season. He's kind kind of neglected that position. Yes, he's brought in Benny Snell, he's brought in Anthony McFarland, but he continued to start his quote-unquote Mike Tomlin guys over top of them as opposed to letting these guys develop, and he never really showed a commitment to drafting or bringing in any type of legitimate running back outside of what they had, and so that was a big problem for them. This is one of the positions that I'm most excited for. In terms of the offseason, the wide receiver that we decided to sign in place, to kind of help us out on the outside is Jordan Matthews. And there's a specific reason for this. So the requirement for bringing in a wide receiver was they had to be a player that can play on the outside. So a relatively big receiver, a little bit taller. So Jordan Matthews, you guys can see, is 6'3", and he had to have good hands. So Jordan Matthews has a career catch percentage around 70%, which is better than most of the other free agent wide receivers that were out there, and so we decided to bring Jordan Matthews in as a depth wide receiver because we know that he's reliable. We know that he has those types of hands on the outside. He's not going to be like some superstar player for us, but he's going to be a player that, when he's open and the quarterback throws him the ball, he's going to come down with it, and that's what we were trying to do in terms of adjusting the wide receiver position, and that's all we did. We did trade away Deontay Johnson for a third-round pick and a fifth or sixth. No, it was a third and it was a late round pick. It was somewhere between a fifth and a seventh, but we traded away Deontay Johnson for a third and a late round pick. I apologize. So a third round pick and a late round pick, and that allowed us to bring in a couple of extra draft picks, which I think was extremely crucial. Deontay Johnson actually went over to the Colts because they are supposedly one of the most wide receiver needy teams in the NFL. In terms of the offseason, we decided to do two things at the tight end position. We decided to give Jesse James a pretty low-end contract to come back and play for the Pittsburgh Steelers again. He liked his time here. I don't think he had a ton of success over in Detroit, and he may be looking to come back. Now, you could insert any other veteran tight end that is decent at both catching the ball and blocking. Doesn't have to be particularly good. Jesse James, just the one that I particularly decided to go with because the Pittsburgh Steelers are familiar with him and they appreciated what he brought to the table. In addition to that, we decided to add a tight end in the draft. Yet another position that I think the Pittsburgh Steelers have tended to neglect in the draft, and that is tight end. And so in the fifth round, we went with Ruckert here, Jeremy Ruckert out of Ohio State, who is a player that can do a couple of different things. He's a well-rounded tight end. He comes in as a player that could potentially actually insert into the lineup and help you out in a couple of different ways. We're not talking about starting and taking on a heavy workload, but somebody that can certainly come on as a blocker and help you out and do various different things. So we did address the tight end position in bringing in a veteran on a cheap deal and bringing in a rookie player. With that being said, let's move on to the offensive line because there are a lot of moves to be made here. So Alex Leatherwood was our first round draft pick. Now, we were looking at all of the top offensive linemen in the first round. This ultimately ended up being the best lineman that was available at our position. So insert any top offensive lineman in the first round of the draft. This is what the Pittsburgh Steelers have to draft, especially after Marquise Pouncey's retiring, them letting go Villanueva and other guys like that they should not re-sign, and needing to bring in fresh talent to really kind of spark the offensive line and help them get good again. Their first round pick has to be an offensive lineman, and if they go anywhere else other than offensive lineman, I personally believe it's a mistake unless there is a fantastic quarterback that they absolutely love that falls to them in the first round. They could probably get their quarterback that they want in the second round or later. So Alex Leatherwood was my pick in the first round. This one's a big one. We decided in addition to that we were going to sign a couple of offensive linemen that were out there that had high pedigree in the past. Now, the requirement for bringing in a backup offensive lineman was that they basically had to be a failed offensive lineman elsewhere that had a high pedigree, and so we brought in left tackle David Sharp. David Sharp is a guy that was a fourth round draft pick a couple of years ago, and so he has a little bit of a pedigree. He's known to be a potentially good offensive lineman, but he failed at where he was at, and so we're bringing him in the hopes that our change of coaching staff can allow him to develop and flourish into the talent that people thought he was going to be. Now, at the left guard position, we have Chukwuma Okorafor bumping over to left guard. He's played here before, and then not much to be said about that, but we added Chance Warmack on a veteran deal. Now, this was a big pickup for me. Chance Warmack was a former first-round pick, a former top 10 pick. And so Chance Warmack, yes, he's 29 years old. He's bounced around the league a couple times, but with us looking to run the ball, that's what Chance Warmack's good at. He's by no means a good pass blocker, but he's a pretty decent run blocker, and he certainly adds a nice veteran presence on the offensive line, somebody that has high pedigree, has been there before, and can help us out if the coach is able to get more out of him. And so that was another veteran pickup. You could insert another veteran offensive lineman that has high pedigree, but I think Chance Warmack is one that will likely be out there and could really help out the Steelers offensive line in terms of the run game. Now at center, we moved Kevin Dotson to center. This decision was interesting because, this basically comes down to what's going to happen in terms of the draft. Do they draft a top center? Do they go out and sign a center? We decided not to sign Mike Pouncey and instead elected to take the young Kevin Dotson, who has shown a lot of promise on the offensive line, and insert him into the center position. Now, this isn't necessarily what they're going to do, but based on my offensive line between him and Chukwuma Okorafor and the other guys, it makes the most sense to take Kevin Dotson and play him at center because he's 6'4". He's a little bit shorter, a little bit stouter. He kind of fits that mold of a center a little bit better than a 6'6" Okorafor or a 6'6" Leatherwood or anybody else that was on the roster. I thought maybe the Pittsburgh Steelers, if they're in dire need of a center, could take David DeCastro and play him there, but I don't necessarily trust that move. David DeCastro has kind of looked weak at guard, and I wouldn't trust him going up against big D tackles on a consistent basis, so I don't think he should bump to the center spot. So Kevin Dotson bumps there, J.C. Hassenauer sticks around, and then we brought in Drew Dahlman out of Stanford, another center prospect. This was a late round draft pick, specifically, let me see if I can take a look here. Dahlman was a 6th round draft pick. So a decent draft pick there, a lineman that could potentially develop into something. We know that the Pittsburgh Steelers like their Stanford lineman because of David DeCastro. And then on top of that, we brought in another Stanford lineman at right tackle, Walker Little. Walker Little, another offensive lineman that can contribute early on and fight for that spot with Zach Banner. And like I said, this is something that I want to encourage with this team. I want to encourage competition. I want to encourage having multiple guys with high pedigree that can fight for an offensive line spot, and so Zach Banner and Walker Little will be competing for that right tackle spot. I think that that's incredibly important. In addition to that, we brought in KJ Henry as a 7th round draft pick, just a depth defensive lineman out of Clemson. Insert any other depth defensive lineman, it does not make a difference. We brought in Porter Gustin as a cheap defensive lineman, kind of veteran depth. Again, insert any veteran defensive lineman that you can get for super cheap. Does not have to be particularly good, but somebody that could, maybe fit the system, because these guys, this is more of a run stopper. He kind of fits behind Stephon Tuitt. And then in terms of defensive tackle, with a 7th round, our other 7th round pick, and so this was probably the pick that we acquired in the Deontay Johnson trade. With our other 7th round pick, we brought in Mustafa Johnson. Again, just a depth defensive tackle that has some run stopping ability. Insert any other depth defensive tackle from the late rounds in the draft and you'll be fine. We also brought in Steve McClendon as a veteran defensive tackle. Not going to cost a lot of money. You could find probably some other player out there similar for a very cheap contract to help out on the defensive line. As you guys can see, that's kind of the theme here. We don't need expensive defensive linemen, just cheap guys to come in and rotate in and give us a little bit of depth at that position. Steve McClendon has been here before. He knows the system, so I felt like that was a good option. The next one, we want to talk about Merlin Robertson. Merlin Robertson was a 4th round draft pick, outside linebacker. I think that the Pittsburgh Steelers do need to spend a draft pick in the mid rounds on an outside linebacker to help with their depth, and that's exactly what I did with Merlin Robertson. Could be any other outside linebacker out there that they like as a pass rusher that fits, that can rotate with TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith on the outside, but they need somebody that can legitimately rotate at that position. Now, the other outside linebacker position, again, we brought in a veteran, a cheap veteran, Barkevious Mingo. He's been around for a long time. Again, the requirement for this position is simple. It has to be a veteran player that has sacked an NFL quarterback before. I mean, the requirements are not hard here. This is something that Tomlin has failed to do for a very long time. I don't know why he struggles with doing this, but bring in a veteran pass rusher, outside linebacker that has literally sacked an NFL quarterback before. That's the only requirement, and that's what Barkevious Mingo is. You could insert anybody else that you could get for cheap that has a sack or two on an NFL quarterback, and that would be fine outside linebacker depth. And so that's where Barkevious Mingo comes into play. At middle linebacker, no changes. At defensive back, you guys might question this decision, but I brought back Artie Burns. I think that it was a mistake on Mike Tomlin and the staff's part to let Artie Burns go. I know that he hasn't really had success anywhere that he's been, but a player that I'm bringing in simply for preseason to get some playing time to, have a chance to compete for a roster spot. And then this is a pick that, some people might say, oh, you're cheesing, you're picking one of the hidden gem players. But Obi Melifonwu, if he's out there, is a player that would be perfect for the Pittsburgh Steelers. He's big. He's 6'4", 224. He would be able to do exactly what they want a slot cornerback to do, which is the spot that has been vacated by Cameron Sutton and Mike Hilton vacating the cornerback spot. And so, we're just trying to generate competition at the slot cornerback position. And so bringing in a couple of low-end corners, it doesn't have to be Artie Burns, it doesn't have to be Obi Melifonwu, but players that could compete for that spot would probably help out this team. Free safety and strong safety, nothing has changed there. My biggest signing, in my opinion, the one that I am most excited for, is getting an actual legitimate punter into the team, because the Steelers haven't had that for so long. We signed Corey Bjorquez out of New Mexico. He had the highest punt average out of any punter in the NFL last year. I highly doubt that this guy is actually a free agent in real life. I don't know a lot about him. He will probably be signed by whatever team he was on, but I know that when I was researching stats of the punters that were out there, he had the highest punt average out of any punter in the NFL, and that's exactly what the Pittsburgh Steelers need, is a legitimate punter. And so we brought in Corey Bjorquez. Again, insert any other legitimate punter that can punt the ball further than 30 yards, and you're pretty much golden as the Pittsburgh Steelers, because you can count on your defense. Get a punter in there that can actually punt it, a decent distance, instead of a Jordan Berry type of player that has no clue how to actually punt the football. So those are our acquisitions for the offseason. Like I said, I'm going to be running through preseason, and a lot of these guys are going to be competing. Not much more to say other than that. Hopefully you guys look forward to seeing this as we go forward. I know that we had a couple of questions of whether I was going to play the games or simulate the games broadcast style. I'll leave that up to you guys. To be honest, I was thinking of just simulating them and letting the team run on their own, broadcast style, and we can watch some of the gameplay. I'm going to be getting my actual legitimate computer here soon, and that should allow me to actually edit gameplay once I figure out how to do that. So I don't know. You guys let me know in the comment section which way you guys would prefer to see this Steelers franchise play out, and make sure you guys hit that subscribe button. Make sure you guys hit that like button, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Hopefully you guys have a good night.